started to do this thing on indoor plants, and I got into it about 10 or 15 of these slides, and I got to noticing something, and we'll get into it a little bit more as we go on. And the lady sitting here on the corner got advanced. She got into it. But we do spend 90% of our time indoors. Believe it or not, it's. We were talking about this a little earlier, and the question was asked: do we spend 90% of our time indoors? Well, 90% of 24 is roughly 22 hours. That means 2 hours that we spend outdoors. So we don't spend an awful lot of that unless we do an awful lot of gardening or yard work or something like that. You know, farmers are going to spend probably half their time outdoors, but we as citizens of the town and city, we don't spend as much time outside as a lot of people do. So a lot of our time is spent indoors. It may be not 90%, it may be 80 or 75%, but that's still a lot of the time, because a third of the time, roughly, we're going to be asleep in bed, and that's going to be usually indoors. So, you know, and then we're going to be doing indoor chores and doing office work, cleaning up the house and washing clothes and fixing dinner and whatever. So a lot of our time is spent indoors. So indoor plants can be a hobby. And also, as we will find out, indoor plants can help purify the air that we breathe indoors. There are also a few problems that we'll get into a little later. But they not only convert carbon dioxide to oxygen, they trap and absorb many pollutants like carbon monoxide and some of the others that we'll get into. Brenda? Dumb cane. Anybody ever heard of dumb cane? Yeah, it is. It's an indoor plant. It's a low light plant, which a lot of people, if they're indoors, they enjoy a plant that doesn't have to be sitting in the window or somewhere close. So it's a low light plant, but as you will see, it has problems because symptoms, it's dumb cane because the sap can cause your tongue to feel dumb or numb. And actually, it can be fatal to humans if you get enough of that sap. So this plant can be dangerous. So be careful with it. A lot of people may even need to wear plastic gloves or something like that. Make sure you wash your hands and clean your hands. In large amounts, it can be fatal. Next, oleander. It's an indoor flowering shrub. It's also an outdoor flowering shrub. This is probably one of the most fatal plants that you can find anywhere in the landscape. And believe it or not, you will go to a lot of federal office buildings or federal government activities or wherever where they're going to do some landscaping. And this is one of the most popular plants around. And it can be fatal, particularly to kids. And they have this around government playgrounds, particularly federal buildings. But it is something that you have to be extremely aware of. And you know, it's a beautiful plant. The flower is pretty. The shrub, the plant itself is good looking, but it can be fatal. One of the oldest living plants, I've got two of these. One of them's my son, and one is mine. We're not quite as old as it is. It probably goes back a couple of million years. And you will see this particularly in the south, way south, usually from about Montgomery, Alabama south. It can be planted outdoors, and if you go into Florida, you'll see some of these things that are almost as tall as this ceiling. They're huge. It can be big. The two that I have are in containers, so that I bring them in in the fall and put them in a protected area where they do get cold, and it looks like maybe they got a little bit too cold this past winter on 1 or 2 nights. But it's an attractive looking plant. It's unreal how big they can get, particularly down in Florida. I didn't know they got that big until I went down there a few years ago and I saw some of those things. And the trunk of them get 2 to 3 feet in diameter. But it's also poisonous. They're saying here that it may be the reason why it has survived for several million years is because it is poisonous. All parts of it are poisonous. The leaves, the seed, the roots, the whole thing is poisonous. So be careful with it if you have one. The ZZ plant. Low light, again, plant's poisonous. Keep it away from children. Now you're beginning to see why my curiosity got up a little bit. All these plants that they're talking about that are indoor plants, and some of them that are outdoor plants, can be poisonous. They can be maybe not totally fatal, but they can give you some severe problems. So if you have some of these, pay attention to what they are and make sure that you take care of them and work with them in a way that they will not cause anyone any problems. But Anthurium leaves can cause severe burning in the mouth and skin. Parts of the plant are poisonous if ingested, may cause mild stomach disorders, but it's it's a plant that we see quite frequently. It's well, I've seen them at Kroger's and just about everywhere else. But it's something that you want to make sure that you take care of. Asparagus fern, it's not a fern. It kind of looks maybe like one. It got a name. Where it came up with the name, I have no earthly idea. Contains a steroid compound that the berries, you can see there in the small lower part, those kind of brown green things are actually berries, and they're not highly poisonous, but they can cause an upset in your stomach. So, cyclamen, we've seen this again. We've seen them just about everywhere. Can result in drooling, vomiting, diarrhea. Large ingestion can result in cardiac problems, even seizures, even death. So again, be careful. You're beginning to see now why I started I changed my attitude, my approach to this, because I wanted to make sure that some of you people were aware of the health problems that can be created by some of these plants that we have indoors. Crown of thorns. White sap, toxic, cause skin irritation, temporary blindness if it gets in your eyes. So don't get some of the on your hands, rub your eyes, because you can give you temporary blindness. Clean the dripping. I don't know why they're wanting to clean the pruners and alcohol or something of that nature. I don't think it's going to create a problem unless you happen to be touching it and it may be going into your eyes or to your mouth or something of that nature. But these are some interesting plants. So calla lily, and I just went dead here. And did it come back on? Yes, it did. Contain a poisonous ingredient. Control center should be called immediately if you happen to get some of this in your mouth. So it's a highly toxic plant. Jerusalem cherry. A friend of ours, when we were living in Memphis, had Jerusalem cherries in his yard, and it's a perennial. It's kind of a little shrub-like thing, and it keeps cutting in and out. It must be running out of a battery. But anyway, he would cut it back. He told me, he says, don't eat any of those, even though it is actually it's kind of a, throw it away. Kind of like, look like cherries. And he told me, he says, don't try to eat any of these. They look a little bit like a hot pepper, but it's not. So don't try to eat it because it can create some problems. Dauphine, If dolphin is present in the garden, small children should be kept away from it. Headaches, diarrhea, delirium, convulsions, victim falls into a coma, death will occur. Some of these plants are extremely hazardous to have around. And even though they're common to us, we see them all the time, everywhere, florist, Kroger, Walmart, wherever, we can have problems with some of these plants. Weeping Latin fig is weeping fig. It's not a real problem, but it's an interesting plant. You've seen these things probably with their trunks that have been intertwined, twisted and intertwined. It's a nice plant for the inside. It doesn't create a problem health-wise like some of these that we saw at the beginning do, but it is a nice looking indoor plant. It can actually go outside, but not during the winter. It needs to be brought back inside to keep from being killed by cold weather. It's real easy to propagate. If you just take a few cuttings, stick them in some water, it'll start to root, and you'll have multiple, and you can take the way they make those twisted trunks, and they put about 4 of these together, and as they grow, they weave them together and let it grow. And then they, when they start trimming the top, while that trunk still stays intertwined and twisted, so that it gives you that kind of a strange looking appearance of that upright plant that has multiple trunks that are all twisted together.
It's very finicky. Does not like to be moved. Once you've established a place for it, leave it there, or it'll drop all its leaves if you move it.
Yeah, but it'll come back.
Yeah.
It just, yes. Pretty much so, yes. Spider plant, and we've all seen the spider plant. This is an interesting, it's great to have a hanging basket and see these plants that come down, and each one of these plants that drop off, they can be rooted, and you'll have multiple plants. It's a real interesting. This is not one of those problem plants that you have a problem as far as the health concern, but it is an interesting plant because it's unusual. Here it is, that green and white stripe, and then these little things come dropping off, and when you see one, it's going to get your attention. You're going to go look at it, and almost you just go up and take a look at it and feel the little plantlets that are coming off or the babies as they call them here.
I've had 3 of those that managed to kill every one of them.
I'm sorry?
What's bad for the spider plant?
What's bad with them?
Yeah,
Nothing?
How did I kill off 3 of them in 5 years?
I don't know because all the ones I've ever seen, they are almost impossible to kill.
Too much water.
Yep, in all probability, it would be too much water.
Okay.
That would be my first guess, because believe it or not, a lot of plants, or most plants, unless they are specific that they have to have a lot of water, most plants really do not like excessive amounts of fluid, of water. They would take it to be a little bit more dry than too wet, because plants have to have 3 things. They have to have soil in order to hold the plant up. They have to have water, but then they also have to have air. And if that soil is too wet, they can't get any air into the roots. And it takes air into the roots in order for that root to absorb the nutrient out of the soil, to take it into the plant and take it up into the plant so it will live. A plant actually only uses about 98% of the water that it pulls in through the roots. And actually, the water acts like our blood system. What it does, it absorbs the nutrient out of the soil, takes it into the root, and that water carries that nutrient up into the plant, into the leaves, to where it keeps the plant alive. Then that excess, that 98% of the water, transpires out through the leaves back out into the atmosphere. So you don't have have a lot of water in a plant. Yeah, there's a lot of water in a plant, but a lot of the water that absorbs through the roots goes right back out into the atmosphere. That's where the excess water goes, and it's not stored in the plant, but it actually transfers out into the atmosphere. All right, Mr. Snake plant. Oh, mother-in-law's tongue. Oh, we had one of these things. It must have been 30 years old, and it finally gave up. But you know, it's an interesting plant. It's something you can put back in the corner. It doesn't need light, but about maybe an hour a day, if that much. And but it's an interesting plant. It also absorbs carbon dioxide and releases oxygen. And they say here, sharing your room with these plants can give you a slight oxygen boost while you sleep if you keep it in the bedroom. An interesting idea. Never thought of that, but that's not where we kept ours. We kept it in the...
Kill them all with water sometimes.
Okay.
We have a shared palate.
Yeah, okay. All right. This is, have a low light in your house? Yes, I think we all do. If anywhere it's in the closet, if nothing, well, nowhere else. But you know, every house has got some corner somewhere where it doesn't have an awful lot of light, and this is a good plant to put one. Matter of fact, we have one in our dining room. And it's in an area where it hardly gets any light, just some light, not much more than this, and it does fine. We do take it out and put it on our sun porch in the summertime, and it kind of grows and does its thing. But then it's doing better where it sits right now than it does really in the summertime. It's really not a bamboo, but it gives the appearance, the trunk gives some appearance of bamboo. Red-edged Rossinia or Madagascar dragon tree. I've seen these things grow 20 feet tall. I was in a house back, 25 or 30 years ago, and I saw this plant sitting over, and it was a real modern house, and it had probably a 20-foot ceiling, and the plant went almost to the ceiling. It was sitting over in an area where it had a lot of light. It did well. The foliage is near the top. It's almost like the palm trees you see TV shows from California, and the only thing you see is a stick with a fuzz at the top with a little bit of green stuff. Well, that's almost how this grows. But new leaves emerge, the bottom leaves drop off. It's a nice plant. It can be taken into a shady spot outside in the summertime, but it actually is an indoor plant. Chinese evergreen. This is a shade plant. Temperatures below 45 degrees can injure it, so it is definitely a house plant. So it's something, you can see that it does change from a green into kind of a red, so it can change color, and it's again another indoor plant well suited to low light situations. Like most of our houses, unless you have something that has an awful lot of glass in it, you're going to have a lot of low light areas. So you may want something to brighten up and color up an area, so you want to use some of these plants we're talking about. Aloe vera. We got one of these sitting on our counter in the kitchen, and it's doing well. It doesn't take much anything either. It just sits there. Full sun, it likes full sun, but it will also take an awful lot of dark, because where we have it sitting, it's moderate light. It gets no direct sunlight at all. It doesn't take very much water. Matter of fact, it enjoys very little water. Probably every 10 days at the most would be as much as you would need to put water on it. If you put too much water on it, it's going to die, because it came from the desert, out there where they get water maybe once every 6 months, but they get a bunch of it at one time, like like they did in California this last spring. Yes, ma'am.
Is there any way to root a plant, an aloe vera from the parent plant?
Yes.
I'm glad to bring somebody some.
You like?
Mine has babies.
It's got babies. No, okay, okay.
Is it married? Is it married? Married.
Well, I don't know, but it,
Got out at night.
I've given them away and then more babies.
Now, I'm not that familiar with how it propagates. Does it have,
Falling out of the, mine has babies.
huh, yours have babies? Huh,
They bloom.
They just come up by the side of the.
come up with the side. Okay, I've never seen one multiply. No, I haven't. I've seen them like this, lots of them, but I've never seen one that has multiplied, that multiplies.
Maybe you had a male.
It bloomed. Don't you remember the bloom?
No?
Well, it did.
Oh, okay.
And then it died.
It bloomed and then it died.
Could yours have been a male plant? I mean, there's no that.
Did it bloom? If it blooms, would it? Well, yes, male plants can bloom. Sure, I'm sure. Yes, it can. But anyway, somewhere. But yeah, there we go. I don't see one coming off. Is that something that's coming off on the left-hand side there? Maybe a baby? You ladies that, just a root. Okay, all right. All right, next one. Boston fern. Boy, this is an old one. It goes way back. It's a good plant. It's a natural air humidifier, removes formaldehyde. It also is best among air purifying house plants. Likes bright light, damp soil, but can be tolerant of drought and or partial light. So, you know, it's one of those plants that you need to be in particularly if you're in a situation where your house does not maybe smell well. It will kind of help clean that air and also provide a little bit of oxygen because it takes it in and manufactures. Moth orchid, Phalaenopsis, thrives high humidity. We don't have too many houses with high humidity. Might do well in a bathroom where there's some light. Not hot, midday sun, likes watering. Unlike many types of houseplant, almost complete drying out between watering. That's the way most plants work better. You don't really need for them to wilt as such, but they need to dry out so that those roots can live and breathe and do better.
Do not put ice on it.
No, do not put ice on them. No, do not put ice on them. What does that do?
I thought it would have frozen them, but
It does.
It does. It chills those roots to the point to where it kills the plant.
The American Orchid Society does not recommend ice.
well, how did that get started?
People want watering. You take them and pour water into it, it'll run over maybe. Well, if you put ice on it, it's going to melt and drip down. So that was an easy way of adding water without having to stand there and let it soak in as you poured it on. You put ice on it, sure, it's going to melt, but it's also doing another thing. It's chilling that soil, it's chilling the roots to where they're not going to be doing what they're supposed to do at the proper time and in the proper way.
It's a tropical plant.
Yes.
You don't put ice on anything in the tropics.
No. No.
I was given one of those for Christmas. It's still alive, but it had a little cup with it and it said put warm water on
Yes. If anything, warm water, not ice. A lot of people have put ice on them for a while, but it's wrong. Baby rubber plant, we've all seen these, another good indoor plant. It removes formaldehyde and some other toxins. It likes filtered light, infrequent watering. Again, not a lot of water. It does like and well-nutrient soil, one that feeds it well. May not contain any poisonous parts, but it's an interesting plant. It doesn't grow that excuse me, it doesn't grow that fast, but it is a nice plant for indoors. It does well in the shade if you want to set it out in the summertime in the shade where it can get fresh air and do its thing and kind of run through its natural cycle. Cast iron plant. I'm sure that most of y'all have seen every one of these plants at one time or another, but it's something that we're going over, and particularly those front end ones where I was talking about where they can be toxic or can create problems. I wanted to make sure that you knew that. This is one that says it practically thrives on neglect. Don't overwater. Again, it doesn't like soggy soil, and don't repot it every often. It doesn't like to be disturbed, like me. Keep it in the pot. Keep those roots bound, pretty much. If you're going to repot it, don't put it from a little pot into a big pot, because those roots, they don't like to be disturbed that much. Leave them alone. Next. Coffee plant. Most people do not have a clue that you can raise a coffee tree indoors, but you can. They will even bloom. They will even produce a coffee bean indoors. It's an interesting plant. It's a very pretty plant. My son has a coffee plant. He didn't have it indoors, but he's actually collected some coffee off of it this year. But anyway, it's something it's an interesting plant, a member of that family, and it's an evergreen, glossy dark leaves, ruffled edges, nice stem. You can see the nice flower that it has up there, and you can maybe get enough beans off of it, a small one, to do 1 cup of coffee a year. But it's an interesting plant. Friendship plant, I'm not that familiar. I have seen this. It's a fast-growing plant. The leaves are really kind of weird looking. You pinch off a growing tip, and if you want to, you stick it down in water and it'll root. Keep the plant compact. You can take cuttings, and those cuttings will also root. Don't throw them away. You can root them, bring them into here, and I'm sure somebody here will be willing to take 1 or 2 of them off your hand, like they do my Christmas cactus every year. But anyway, next, Brenda.
Almost like a coleus.
Almost, yes. Yes, it does. Yes. This plant, I have seen 1 or 2 of them, not too many, but it's interesting in that it grows just like, I don't know. It's twisted. It's an unusual plant. That's what they say up here. Ornamental. It's on its own corkscrew rush, also some sizzling display of leafy and flowering plants. This is a little bit different. It's a perennial evergreen. It's an easy house care. So it's, again, it's another one of those that you don't want to overwater. Keep it a little bit dry. The pepper plant, this is a Christmas pepper. I don't know that I've seen a Christmas pepper. I've seen other peppers, but it's an interesting plant in that once it blooms and once it sets the fruit on it and the fruit matures, it dies regardless. So it really is more or less an annual rather than a perennial plant. Now there are some that are perennial, but this particular one, and actually you're growing this plant for the peppers themselves and their color, rather than I think it is an edible plant, but it's not one that you're going to do an awful lot with. It's more for an ornamental plant for the peppers, and it's going to produce fruit that says there for about 6 weeks. And it's going to bloom first, but you're going to have the peppers there, and it's going to be a late coloring plant. And that's why it's called a Christmas pepper. It does it kind of like a Christmas cactus. It's a late, and you pick up the color from the peppers late in the year when you're not getting maybe a lot of color from something else. And I'm through.